Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the commission meeting of July 25th, 2023. I call the meeting to order and will note for the record that we do have a quorum of commissioners present. Commissioner Kipley will be absent today. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones, and if you plan to speak during public comment, if you'll just sign in the corner and leave your address. You don't have to say that publicly. I'd like to remind everyone to silence their cell phones, and I invite everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Then I'd like to know if there are any requests by commissioners or the public to remove items from the consent agenda. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move, Benninga.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Benega,
Aye.
Bleinberg,
Aye.
Karski,
Aye.
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to regular business. First item 10 is a briefing on the second quarter 2023 American Rescue Plan expenditures. Susan, good morning.
Good morning. Susan Beeman with the Auditor's Office. I'm here today just to provide you a briefing on our last quarter's expenses for our American Rescue Plan Act funds. As of second quarter 2023, for that period, we spent $1,033,335.33. There were no new projects reported, just ongoing expenditures related to the expenditures to the projects that we had previously reported on. That brings our total expenses to date to just over $19.3 million, and we are that leaves a remaining amount unspent at the end of second quarter of just over $18.1 million. And this will be reported to the U.S. Treasury by the end of the month.
Thank you. Questions for Susan? I know we talked quite a bit about this during budgeting season, and so it is quite an impressive number when you see it in black and white in front of you. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 11, which is a public hearing for the first reading of an ordinance providing for an establishment of speed zones on the Minnehaha County system. Steve Groen, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Steve Groen, Highway Superintendent. In April of 2021, a speed zone ordinance was adopted to enable enforcement of speed limits under 55 miles per hour on county highways. Today's proposed ordinance would replace the previous one. Since 2021, growth within Crooks has made it necessary to adjust speed zones. The three proposed changes all occur along Highway 137, 470th Avenue. The south change is adjacent to Tri-Valley's new K-4 school, and the two north changes are adjacent to a new development on the north side of Crooks. These changes were requested by the city of Crooks. Our plan is to bring this back next week for the second reading for this proposed ordinance.
Are there any questions for Steve? Steve, I'm just curious whether the speed limits that were requested by the city of Crooks, are they in line with similar speed limits that we have in the county?
They're very similar to what we have in other similar areas, especially the school zone on the south side.
Okay. Commissioner Karski.
Are there standards, either state or federal, on where, I mean, because of within approaching distance to a residential area or municipality, or is it kind of, well, the people want it, so we're going to do it?
There's a federal guidance through the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which Federal Highway puts out, but that is guidance. They do leave some discretion to the local agency, but we do try to follow similar guidance that the state and federal governments provide local agencies on administering school and other speed zones.
Okay, so guidance.
like, the south one, we're moving the 45-mile-per-hour zone south because the 25-mile-an-hour zone is moving south. Well, then it got it real close to the Highway 130 intersection, so then we made the decision to move it to the south side of the intersection. It's just the guidance doesn't take into account any other side streets. That's why we give you the leeway to make sound judgment calls.
Okay.
All right, so we will have some time to think about this, and then we'll bring it back for approval at the next meeting. Is that how
Right.
this will work?
That is correct.
Okay. So do we need a motion on this?
Do you need a motion to set the hearing date for the second reading for August 1st?
That's what
Is
I.
my motion.
Okay, it's motion,
Second that.
motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you. Next item is item 12 is to authorize the Highway Department to purchase a 2024 Chevy Silverado 3500 under State of South Dakota procurement. I butchered that, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
That's all right. We were notified last week when talking with Lamb Motors out of Oneida, who is the state contract holder for both Ford and General Motors vehicles, that the F-250 pickup, Super Duty pickup that we ordered last October, most likely will not be built this year. And they weren't sure what the timing would be, but there were slots available to have General Motors Super Duty pickups built instead. We are able to purchase a 1-ton Chevy for slightly more than what we were going to pay for the F-250. We do have money in the budget to do it. Plus, we were assured that it would be take delivery yet this year. So we're requesting your permission to cancel the Ford order and purchase a Chevrolet Super Duty truck in its place.
Questions? Commissioner Karski.
So you'd rather have a GM than a Ford, is that what you're saying?
Pretty neutral on our
Okay.
mix. We bought a Dodge earlier this year, but it's just getting what you can get.
Yeah, I mean, for $600 more, and, you know, just the fact that it's a whole model year newer seems pretty reasonable to me. In fact, that you can get one.
Plus the fact that it's a 1-ton truck versus a 3/4 ton truck, it'll just be more versatile for us down the road.
Other questions? Commissioner Blymberg.
Just curious, is there any fee to cancel the order?
No fee.
Great. Anything else?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any public comment on this today? All right, so we have a motion and a second, no public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That takes us to item 13, which is to authorize the chair to sign a joint participation agreement among Sanford Medical Center, Avera McKinnon Hospital, and University Health Center, the City of Sioux Falls, and the Sioux Empire Triage Center in Minnehaha County to provide for county contribution to the Triage Center in the amount of $400,000. Tom, good morning.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Tom Greco, Commission Administrative Officer. I am going to request today that you withdraw this, and I just want to explain why. We will bring it back to the Commission at a future meeting. We did identify very recently, within the last couple of days, a need to insert some language regarding the use of opioid settlement money. The city has some language in their portion of the agreement that is the effect of the link providing them some detailed information about how that money is spent for reporting requirements. So we do want to insert it instead of having to do an amendment later. That is the only area that would change based on what you saw online. So I would request at this time that it be withdrawn, and again, we'll bring it back with that updated language at a future meeting.
Any questions?
Just a comment, I think this is a wise move and good use of the funds that are made available to us with the opioid funding. So we just need a little time to clean it up, basically. So I'd make a motion to, or do you need a motion if we're withdrawing it?
I would recommend you
yeah.
just withdraw it, and
With a motion?
yes.
Yeah.
Make a motion to withdraw.
I'll second that, but I have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Bennington.
Tom, I'm assuming that all the original partners that were formed at the very beginning are going to continue in the contract for next year? hospitals,
Oh,
Yes, the
the
overall
city.
contract, yes, and with regard to this specific opioid settlement contribution language, we'll be coordinating with the other parties over the coming days and weeks.
Thank you.
Is there anyone for public comment on this before I go to a vote? All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Karski.
Aye.
Benega.
Aye.
Blindberg.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, that takes us to item 14, which is a briefing on proposed changes to the commission rules of procedure. Tyler, good morning.
Good morning, Tyler Clack, Commission Office. You may remember in September of last year, the Commission passed a Rules of Procedure document to sort of give some guidance and outline how Commission meetings operate. Part of that document is that every July, the Commission is to review the rules to kind of be able to make any changes that the legislature may have made or anything that we identify as needing to change. Attached to this agenda item are 11 suggestions that we've identified that we hope would make this document better. I guess I would ask you, Commissioner Bender, do you want me to go through each one or just see if there's any questions generally? I should say the general ask today is to just let you know that these are what we're looking at, and then we'll come back probably either August 1st or another day to make, to ask for a final vote.
Well, I think the commission's had an opportunity to look at them, so I'm not sure that it's necessary to go through each one. Is there any in particular that you feel like you want to highlight?
I would say the one that, there's at least a couple that we for sure want to make, in my opinion. Revision number 2 is a clarification and sort of a simplification where recently the statute related to executive session was amended. And instead of making a change to this section of the rules every time that that statute is updated, this reference just refers to the statute generally. That way it accommodates and includes every change that is made, and that way it keeps the commission able to go into an executive session for the correct purposes every time. The other one I would suggest that is a new addition is number 3. And this is whenever a change is being suggested either to the department head policies and procedures manual or the employee handbook, at first, whomever is making that suggestion, bring it as a briefing first, primarily because these don't happen very often. And that way we can make sure that especially all staff who may not pay attention to the employee handbook all that often, know that way it's being amended. At least it gives them some chance to have a heads up on whatever that change is, and then the individual bringing the suggestion will come back at another meeting to request a final adoption of that change. Those are the 2 that I think are worth just kind of pointing out at this point.
Commissioner Karski.
Just trying to recall, help me out, Tyler, regarding the consent agenda. Is there an area where we talk about the public having the opportunity to comment on the consent agenda like they do on the regular business?
I believe there is. I believe as part of the entirety of the commission's agenda, at each interval, there's an opportunity for public comment. And this.
But before, I'm talking before we vote on the consent agenda, for if somebody wants to address the commission on the consent agenda.
Boy, it happened like 3 minutes ago. You'd think I'd remember. I think so.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I
Answer for
think,
you.
go ahead.
It's not in the policy.
Okay.
Okay.
Folks have the opportunity to move things off of the consent agenda, and then they'd have an opportunity for public comment on that item. Is that what you're addressing, Commissioner
Well, no,
Christie?
I'm suggesting that if an individual in the public hasn't had a chance to talk to a commissioner, but there's an item on the consent agenda, whether it be an abatement or something within policy guidelines that they would like to say, hey, you guys are doing this, I'd like to comment on it. So for them to have the opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda, if there's an item on there, that they be afforded that before we vote on the consent agenda.
Instead of asking them to take it off the consent agenda for discussion purposes.
Correct.
Well, I think we can have further
Yeah.
discussion on
Yeah,
that.
if I'll kind of wordsmith that and include that in the next when we come back with it. Then.
We're doing our best here, if I may comment. Madam Chair?
Yes.
I mean, this, like you said, we started this, last September? And we're trying to refine it and make it the best possible thing and the best possible meeting program that we can have for public comment and full disclosure. So I think it would be a good addition to have that there. So I don't see it being used very often, but at least before we vote on the consent agenda, just ask for public comment of it to any items that are on the consent agenda. 99% of the time it's not going to happen, but at least it affords the opportunity if somebody would like to.
Definitely.
Any other questions for Tyler? Anybody for public comment on this item? All right. So I don't think there's any vote or anything. That was just a briefing. So that now takes us to regular public comment. If there's anybody here for public comment on an item that wasn't on agenda, this is your opportunity. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair. Sometimes the people have to be creative when they have a need for funding, as it is well known that the city and the county can't impose taxes. But if you're creative, you can do what the city did some time ago, and they started a drainage fee. Well, sometimes you be creative, and this might work, especially today with computers and everything else that we have that can make calculations that would be difficult with a pencil and paper. If a person were to have a public safety fee that would help underwrite the cost of the police, the fire, and ambulance service, it would seem that it could be incorporated as a public service fee that would be dealt with or deal with the volume of structure. Because the larger the structure, the larger the volume, the more likely they're going to need fire protection, the more likely they're going to need ambulance service, the more likely they're going to need police protection. You know, a small little house is probably going to be a small little house, but you have a large office structure, they have a need because they have more people that are there. And there's a whole plethora of things that can take place in a large structure that need special attention. A volume fee, and that could be calculated quite easily now with computers and that sort of thing. And so and no structure is immune, because all structures will use police, fire, and ambulance at some, or have a need for the use of that. They may not use it, but they would have a need. So this is kind of the insurance policy. And it could be incorporated with the county and the city to underwrite that particular public safety expenses. So if you have a Amazon warehouse, large, they pay a fee, but you'd have to calculate what the volume, the cost per volume, or what the fee per volume is. It's not a tax, because it only applies to those particular entities that would the entities that use it pay the fee, and the users, or the people who supply it, they're the ones that get underwritten. So that walking down the street, the only thing it wouldn't apply to would be parks, parking units, and city parks. You know, any of that area would be exempt, but they would only apply to structure. And it might be a way of underwriting the cost of those three that the city and the county provide to the general public. So if I live in a small house, okay, I pay a small fee. If I live in a McMansion, I pay more. If I live in or have a job in a large office building, you can see how that would apply. It's a fee, it's not a tax. I call it being creative in underwriting some of the costs of the business that elected people do for the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here today for public comment? All right, seeing none, I turn it over to the commissioners for commission liaison reports. Any liaison reports this morning? Commissioner Bleinberg?
I was able to attend the community engagement park party at Meldrum Park last week. 175 people, I think, was the final count. So not quite as packed as the Granite Valley, but still a very good turnout and lots of fun interaction with the community.
Great. Well, good. Along that line, both Commissioner Bleinberg and I were at the MacArthur Safety and Justice implementation team meeting last week. Got updates on that. Just as a reminder, we're in the last tranche of that MacArthur money. And we had a report from South Dakota Urban Indian Health, who's receiving a recipient of some of that money. They're doing a lot of street outreach right now. And as part of the community engagement, and that includes this park series, there's also kind of a lunch and learn. And that is this Thursday at Health and Human Services, and Urban Indian Health will be there to talk about that program. So if anybody's interested, that's a good opportunity to hear more about that. We also talked about Warrant Court, which is one of the other initiatives that we're funding with some of that MacArthur money. They have done a run-through on that Warrant Court, and from everybody I talked to, it was a very worthwhile exercise. They realize that they've got a little more work that they're going to do before they take that program live. But they have all the stakeholders at the table, and felt like it was a very good use of their time, and realize that there's still a little work to do before that program can go live. I think those are some of the highlights of the things that we talked about at that meeting last week. All right, anyone else? All right, it takes us to non-action commission discussion. Any non-action commission items? All right, so I would take a motion to go into executive session for purposes of SDCL 1-25-2.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will take about a 5-minute recess, and we'll enter into executive session next door in the commission training room. Thank you, everyone.